The Streets, Traffic, and Refuge Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Here.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderman Kotar.
Here.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present. I'm here, Sharita.
Yes, ma'am. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you.
Present.
I'm sorry, I
Sharita.
didn't get Alderwoman Murphy.
Okay.
I'm here. Here.
Let me see what you got.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Bosley. Chairman, you have 5 present.
Okay, a quorum being present. Sharita, did we get an email of the agenda for today's meeting?
Yes, sir. I can post it to you.
Can you send that out real quick again? 'Cause I can't seem to find it.
What?
Yeah, I did not get one either. With the list
I'll
of
resend it.
The clerk sent it on the 22nd of May, Friday, but I can resend it to the committee.
please.
One second.
20 seconds.
There we go. Got it.
I got calendar.
Bills, minutes, agenda. Okay,
Oh, wait a minute.
so I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated May 12th, 2020.
I move we approve the minutes from May 12th, 2020.
Second.
Second.
No, baby.
It's been moved in second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Don't you dare.
It was second by
Alderwoman Murphy.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Aye. Aye.
Alderman Kotar.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye. Hear me?
Alderwoman Boyd. Yes.
Aye.
Five aye votes.
Thank you. Can we mute Alderman Vaccaro and Lou Golly, please? Thank you. First board bill up is board bill number 1, sponsored by Alderman Joe Vollmer.
21.
Board bill 21, sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
21.
Item number 1.
All right.
21.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What we have here is the naming of a new street in the city of St. Louis. A new street will be in a new subdivision being built in the Hill neighborhood. This is a former 12-acre site of factories that have been demolished that will be home to 58 single-family home lots, 225 unit apartment building, luxury apartment building, and some condominium building. And the new street is required because we have a whole new little cul-de-sac. And we are going to be naming the street. Now, this is not honorary. This is a real city street name. The green sign with the white writing. And we'll be naming it for Robert Ruggieri. Robert Ruggieri was a alderman for the Hill neighborhood for 18 years, serving from, actually he was one of the only aldermen I got to vote for in my life before I ran myself. He served and was a staple of the neighborhood, was quite knowledgeable in everything he did, was well respected, and he died suddenly a few years ago, leaving quite a hole in the neighborhood as far as history and knowledge, and just keeping the whole things done. So as this street became available, we wanted to honor him and honor him specifically. Typically, you'll see street names not have the full name of the person on them. Why we were doing this is because in this Italian enclave of the Hill, you'll run into the name Ruggieri. There used to be a famous restaurant, which is his family owned Ruggieri's. We're trying to make sure that people understand who Robert was and to get away from the fact that it's this Ruggieri place when it should be named after Robert. He put his 18 years in serving this community and giving it his all. So with that, I will open up to any questions.
Okay, we'll start taking questions from the committee. Alderwoman Murphy, are you there? Looks like she stepped away. Alderman Kotar.
No questions, Chairman.
Alderman Kotar. Okay. Martin.
No questions.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd. Oh, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Martin, there you
No
are.
questions.
Alderwoman Martin, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Alderman Bosley. Don't see. All right, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill 23.
One.
I move that we
Okay.
adopt Board Bill 23 with a due pass recommendation.
21. I'm sorry, 21.
I move that we adopt Board Bill 21 with a due pass recommendation. Sorry about that.
Second.
Been moving to
Request for
second.
previous-
Clerk, please call the. Yes, previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. We have new members on.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderman Kotar.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy. 6 aye votes.
Okay, well, Board Bill 21 passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you,
Alderman
Mr.
Vollmer,
Chairman.
you're
Thank
welcome
you,
to
Mr.
stick around if you want.
I'll be leaving you now. Oh, it's too exciting
Okay.
for me. I got a legislation later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
How about that? Okay. Next board bill looks like Board Bill 24. Is Alderwoman Tyus on? Alderwoman Tyus is not here. Next board will be Board Bill number 23, which is the treasurer's parking budget. I do not see the treasurer. Interesting. Okay. We're gonna go into recess for about 5 minutes. We'll be right back.
She just said she was having trouble. I don't know if you can hear me.
The treasurer is here. I can hear you.
Well, there's someone saying they're rebooting. I don't know if you're seeing the
No,
chats.
Yeah, in the
Okay,
chat
I
she
see it.
says she's
Okay.
here. She's having trouble.
Okay.
No. No.
Well, sounds like she's here.
Yes.
STL TV, are we still live?
Yes,
Okay.
she's in here.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, I see her. You have other members that may make presentations that need to get in?
Yes.
Okay.
May you have them raise their hand if they're in the attendees?
How many people we waiting on, Madam Treasurer?
They're already in, so that would be Brandon Comer, Jared Boyd, Michelle Smart.
Okay, all right. Well,
What was the
you
name?
want to go ahead? You want to go ahead and present your budget?
I need Michelle Smart and Jared Boyd in order to start.
Okay.
All your team here?
Is trying to see if Michelle Smart is, you have to let her, can you let Michelle Smart onto the panel, please?
Have her raise her hand for, I don't, unless you vote her not.
Michelle, can you, I click the raise hand.
By the way, I have no control of the the meeting, everything is coming from STL TV as far as letting people on and muting and unmuting people.
All right, she's in.
There
Okay.
we go. Okay, so what's before us is Board Bill 23. And that is the Parking Commission's budget. Ms. Smart, you want to start us off?
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. So our budget for fiscal 21, want to start off by basically saying that with the COVID-19 situation that's going on, this has been an extremely difficult budget to try to put together because it's been a moving target based on events that are continuously changing every day. With that being said, though, the basis of our budget is first jumping off of the projections that we've done for fiscal 20 and whatever known facts that we have or situations that we know for fiscal 21. We've been through several gyrations of this budget. We first presented it back on the 6th of April to the Parking Commission. And at that particular point, we presented a budget that had revenue that was down budget to budget by 1.4 million and expenses up by $517,000. Since then, we've gone back and we've done another scrubbing of the budget based on the fact that we're projecting fiscal 20 right now as being down in revenues by 16% and expenditures being down slightly by 3%. But again, those projections at the time that they were presented have since moved again, as I keep explaining. Bottom line is the budget that we're presenting today is probably still a little optimistic, but at some point you have to put your stick in the ground and move forward. So the April 6th budget, like I said, had revenues down by 1.4 and expenses up by 517,000 budget to budget. We went back and looked at other factors, more information that we got, and we had a second revision that basically took into consideration the stay-at-home order that was going through May 15th of this year, and continuing to get requests from our monthly parkers of suspending their parking as more and more employees are staying at home. And we also got some insight from the Enterprise Center, which is one of our major event revenue suppliers, that they were expecting a 25% impact on their event revenue going forward past June. And so we put together another budget, that had revenue down by 2.6% and expenses only, going up about $267,000. When we put that together and we sat and reviewed that, and that was basically the treasurer and the chief of staff and myself, it came up with a $420,000 negative in terms of net loss. And knowing that that is not, you cannot present a negative budget. So we went back and we scrubbed again. And that is what you're about to see today, is the third rendition of this budget. It became clear after looking at some of the situations that were occurring that it was going to cause us to do a much deeper dive into our expenditures to make this budget balance, or at least come to a number that would be presentable. But again, I continue to emphasize that this is still optimistic. So let's go into the budget as you all have the board bill. The budget that was presented on the 21st of April to the Parking Commission that they approved is what you have in your hands today. And as far as the revenues are concerned, we have a budget that is from budget to budget is $0.7 million. An overall reduction of 13%. From the first budget that was presented on the 6th of April to this budget.
Smart.
Yes. Yes.
Can you put something up on the screen? Can you share the document that you're talking about?
Michelle, which one should we start with?
Say that again,
Which
Madam
one?
Treasurer.
Which one?
You can put the revenue up.
Okay.
Because this what you're presenting right now is different than what you submitted for the board bill. Is that correct? Or is it the same document?
No, it's the station of how it started on the 6th of April and how we've now gotten to the budget that was presented on the 21st of April, which is the budget that you have in your hand. So it's the same budget that you saw and approved.
Okay.
In the parking commission on the 21st of April with the board bill.
Go ahead, Michelle.
All right, so as I was explaining the revenues, budget 21 versus budget 20, down 2.7 million, which is an overall reduction of 13%. And as far as the changes from the budget that was presented, talked about on the 6th of April versus today, and also, again, this is the same budget from the 21st of April. It was an additional 7% decrease from that first budget rendition. The major reasons behind that 2.7 million is due to the COVID-19 effect. We're anticipating a budget reduction of about $2.6 million associated with that. And that can be broken down into meters up about 901,000, parking ticket violation of about 654,000. Events about 813,000, daily transit revenue about 94,000, monthly of 145,000, and miscellaneous revenue, which includes our street permits, our rental revenue in different areas of about 63,000. That gets us to a 2.67. And then we also have about a $72,000 decrease in valet parking services associated with the 7th and Pine Garage. I do want to kind of circle back a little bit as it relates to the decrease in meters and ticket processing revenue, and give a little color on that in terms of the fact that you all know that we did suspend meter enforcement and parking ticket processing during this COVID-19 time. And yes, that has created the situation of having the lower revenue in those areas. But wanted to make sure that it was clear that there are statistics that we found and data that we have found where there have been other cities that did not discontinue their meter enforcement and their parking ticket process, and they continue to enforce, but yet they are still experiencing the same, if not more, of a decrease in their meter and ticket processing. Pittsburgh, for example, is down 90% on their off-street parking. You've got Philadelphia that saw a decline in their violations. You saw Boston even though they were still enforcing, they were experiencing a 75% decrease. Washington, D.C., about 90%. Columbia, Missouri, about 90%. You also have some data on some ticket processing where Columbia, Missouri, which normally has about an $80,000 ticket processing, was down to $6,000. And again, these are areas that continue to try to enforce during COVID-19, but still experience the significant losses that we ourselves are experiencing. So just wanted to bring some color to that as well. From an expenditure standpoint, we're seeing a budget from budget to budget of actually positive impact of about $411,000. Because as I said earlier, when we went back and incorporated the information that we then knew at the time, we came up with a budget that was negative $420,000, which we knew could not be presented. And again, that made us do a really hard look at our expenditure side. So as far as the expenditures, of course, our salaries are at least 43% of our total budget. And that being said, we said that we would keep all salaries at the same level as they are right now. So we will not have any salary increases for fiscal 21. And we also eliminated any new hires or any new positions that we had previously put in the fiscal 21 budget. We eliminated all of that, which resulted in a reduction of 10 FTEs and a decrease in our expenses of about $722,000. We also got a healthcare cost decrease that helped by $156,000. So that is a big piece of where we were able to move our expenditures down to coincide with what we knew was coming in as a negative on the revenue side. Other expenditures, we did have an increase in our supplies because we are continuing to anticipate having to purchase supplies and equipment needing to sterilize and do other type of frequent cleaning processes in this particular COVID-19 environment, as well as an increase in our battery packs for our IPS meters. We are going to experience a $205,000 increase in our equipment and improvements because we have basically tenant improvements with our property leases with Gershman. And even though we were able to put some of those projects on hold for fiscal 20, some of those will come back around for fiscal 21 because our tenants have those rights to exercise that option. So we anticipate our expenses going up for those improvements. On the contractual and other services, we expect to experience a savings of about $99,000 in that category. And that's mainly due to the fact that we have started a new contract for our meter and ticket processing outsourcing. And that will allow us to experience a savings of about $554,000. Our computer services related to ticket processing will be an increase in expenses of about $20,000. We will have additional AT&T services associated with the PEO handhelds of about $31,000. Again, some of these are going up because even though we have saved on the contract, there are certain things that we did not deal with directly under the other vendor relationship. But in totality, will still result in us saving money by moving to this option. We're also going to experience some increase in security for our parking facilities of about 125,000, based on some of the things that we know we need to put in place. Our professional fees dealing with property management commissions under Gershman, we anticipate a 66,000 increase. Our merchant fees, about a $22,000 increase. Park mobile fees associated with increased transactions that we anticipate would be about 111,000. And we are going to experience an increase in insurance costs of about 45,000 due to additional cameras that we continue to put in our facilities, along with the cyber insurance that we've taken out as it relates to dealing with the credit cards and having more and more transactions migrate over to that area. Our non-operating expenditures are going to be up about 122,000. And that is a combination of OFE's transfer as well as the principal portion of our bond payments. So our total expenditure budget, like I said, will be up budget, will be saved. There will be a savings of $411,000 from budget to budget, which brings us to, at the very bottom, brings us to a projected income of $170,000, which is better than a negative 420, but again, a far cry from what we have experienced in the past. Want to touch briefly on the capital budget as well, which is part of the board bill. We approved in the Parking Commission a $1,930,000 capital budget. And again, these are items that will not run through the bond fund because they're not necessarily, some of them are not necessarily directly related to garage facilities, but then there are also, because the bond fund has to deal with garage facilities only. So that is the major reason why we continue to have this fund to deal with other operational capital needs. And as you can see in this budget, we are continuing to improve our fleet. We're also going to have some items that we need to either upgrade as it relates to moving in some of the services related to ticket processing in-house, and also the switching of the vendors will allow us to upgrade our software capabilities on these meters. And so we're going to do that as well, upgrading the on-street meters to go to a 4G platform, as well as replacing some of the single space meters on the street, making sure we have spare parts in our inventory, and also securing some extended warranties on the multi-station meters, multi-space meters. We also need to continue to make sure that our subscriptions for our IT network are intact. And as I stated earlier in the budget, when we talked about some of the equipment type expenditures, the cameras, which we continue to make sure that our lots are as secure and safe as possible. We continue to upgrade and add to those capabilities, as well as putting some improvements into our 1621 Olive location, which are where our PEOs reside, some surface lots, and Couples, which is a garage that does not have a substantial repair and replacement fund under their bonds. we continue to make sure that we are marching against the 10-year plan of making that facility the type of facility that needs to be in existence for our parkers as it relates to the study that we had done with Kimley Horn about 3 years ago. I guess now I will pass it on to Brandon.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm going to discuss briefly the parking division's unrestricted cash reserves. So as of today, the estimated unrestricted cash reserves is approximately $15,773,200. That does not take into account the pending potential transfer to the general fund of $5 million. So if we take that into account, the unrestricted cash reserve after the transfer would be approximately $10,773,200. That going against annual operating expenses of approximately $13,451,000 would give us about 292 days cash on hand. And for context, S&P revised to negative pretty much all of the long-term ratings in the transportation and infrastructure sector due to the impact of COVID-19. And at that time, the average liquidity levels were about 600 days cash on hand for that sector. And the days cash on hand for the sector are typically that high because of the concentration risk of those revenues and the need to have that liquidity as there aren't really other ways to generate revenue in the event of something of this magnitude. And at that time, St. Louis Parking Division had about 523 days cash on hand. So post the transfer at 292, it would put us, it would put the Parking Division below the 365 days cash on hand, which during the prior rating presentation, the city articulated it would attempt to maintain just post the $10 million one-time transfer to the general fund in an attempt to mitigate the thought that there would be a continuous transfer beyond the regularly scheduled transfers from the parking division to the city's general fund. So the cash reserves are used in a couple of different ways. Right now, part have been utilized in order to offset some of the operating expenses that are in excess of the revenues being generated, given the fact that the parking division is not generating normalized revenues due to COVID-19. The other impact that the level of liquidity has is on a rating, which should be looked at also from a monetization standpoint. And what I mean by that is the parking division's senior rated debt is rated A, the subordinate debt is rated A minus. If liquidity levels were to fall due to a need to draw upon those reserves, as well as a prolonged impact from COVID-19, then you could likely experience an actual downgrade into the BBB category. And that does have actual quantifiable monetary effect. One being any future need to borrow would be at a higher interest rate, which would result in paying more interest expense over time. And also the parking division has current debt that is potentially refundable in order to save interest expense right now. That would be in jeopardy, in the event that the rating is downgraded, and therefore the cost of the borrowing would go up and make those refunding candidates no longer viable. So with that, I just wanted to reiterate that the reserves not only serve to provide that operating, I won't say cushion, but literally the reserve in the event that this pandemic does go on, given the fact that a large portion of the revenues derived from the parking division come from large events, which may take a longer time to come online. And therefore, we have not estimated how long or how much the reserves could be drawn down just to potentially offset a reduction in revenues in the event that the budget goals are not reached because of a second wave or some other impact from COVID-19. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jared or the treasurer.
I don't think I have anything to add at this point.
Yeah, we'll entertain any questions you have.
I guess I would, before going to questions, contextualize the reduction of 10 FTEs. That's almost 10% of the FTEs in the parking division. So it is a substantial reduction in the number of people here, just to provide some context.
Okay, Mr. Comer, so you talked about the unrestricted reserves. Why don't you elaborate on the restricted reserves and what is the purpose of the restricted reserves?
Actually, Michelle, do you want to?
Sure, I can take that.
No, wait a minute, Michelle. I'm getting to get confused because he's the financial advisor, correct? And he made the presentation about the unrestricted reserves. So I would think he would be well versed in explaining the restricted reserves since he's paid monthly as the financial advisor, correct?
Yes, he is, and he is well versed on that.
And so I would like to hear from Mr. Comer directly about the restricted reserves.
Okay, so the restricted reserves have to be utilized for a stated purpose. That stated purpose would be from something either in a bond indenture or from some direction given relative to the source of those funds. And therefore, those funds cannot be utilized for regular operating expenditures. And so, which is why the presentation was on the unrestricted reserves, given that those have to be those can be utilized to offset operating expenses.
Right, and so the unrestricted reserves currently is over 100% of the operating expenses currently, correct? Before the 5 million, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
And because we don't have a copy of your report, it would have been nice if we'd have got a heads up and we could have looked at your report prior to your presentation. So, you know, somebody please email the committee a copy of that report out of fairness. But it still looked like with 10 million, what's that, 80% of the operating expenses? Would that be fair?
Roughly about 292 days cash on hand.
I'm asking about the percentage of the unrestricted reserves compared to the operating expenses.
Yes, that is fair.
Okay, and wouldn't you suggest that that's a fairly healthy reserves for an operating agency?
For that sector, no.
Please explain.
So as I was previously mentioning, the average for the transportation and infrastructure sector, which the parking division falls in, is 600 days cash on hand.
Mr. Comer, how long have you been advising the Parking Commission?
I'm not certain, but maybe 6 years approximately, but again, I'm not certain.
Okay, let me ask the treasurer this question. Madam Treasurer, when you became treasurer 8 years ago, how much money was in the reserves?
I don't know. I'd have to look that up in the previous report.
Oh, because it's my understanding it was only 6, and it wasn't really a set aside for restricted or unrestricted, but I could be wrong. That's
There's always been restricted because there's always been debt.
okay. So the 6 million would have been restricted. Is that what you're suggesting?
I wouldn't go with that number. I can look up an old report if you give me a moment.
Okay, that's fine. Let me go ahead and open it up for questions to the committee. Alderman Coder.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I wanted to look at, I guess, that capital document that Michelle had open. I've got my copy is called Capital 2021. A couple questions about that. There was reference to, I guess, start with the fleet, 162,000 in fleet improvements, and then it says see attached. I don't have an attachment unless I'm just missing it. Is there an attachment to this capital? Mine's a PDF. I don't know if this was supposed to be an Excel file or something.
No, that was more from my reference. There is a detailing from the fleet director of his budget, but that's not anything that we have normally submitted.
Okay, could we get a copy of that? I'd like to see, I mean, what we're getting for 162,000 in new vehicles during such tough times.
Sure.
Thank you. Michelle, you also referenced the Kimberly Horn study at Couples. I just don't know what that is. Could you give us a little more detail on what that study, I guess, what is that study and what did it conclude?
Kimberly Horn not only did they did a study on all of our garages in terms of the infrastructure and the different repairs and replacements that need to be done in these facilities. We have a requirement with our bond trustee that every 3 years we are to submit a repair and replacement budget to the trustee that indicates how we are continuing to keep our facilities up to date and safe and secure, and doing the repairs and replacements necessary. We had Kimberly Horn come and do that for us, and they did a 10-year study instead of a 3-year study, which was to our advantage to do a more long-term look. Couples is unique in the situation that it is the only garage that has a bond repair and replacement fund that does not is not substantial enough to handle the types of repairs that is needed for couples. So when we do repair and replacements for couples, it comes out of this particular capital fund, where the other repairs and replacements for the other facilities are coming out of the bond fund.
Okay, so this is essentially a line item for $100,000 of, is it just to go into a maintenance fund, or is it for specific maintenance on the couple's garage?
There are specific maintenance things that are being done with the couple's garage, as it is with every garage.
Gotcha. Could you, I take great interest in this garage. Okay, and I take interest in this garage because we've had problems in the past, and actually Carl from your office has been very helpful on dealing with some of them, and Jared. Could you talk to me just a little bit about what those, for that $100,000, what sort of, I guess, maintenance or improvements we're making to couples?
That is something,
and if that's something you don't have in front of you.
Fingertips, it's in my office. Yeah, it's in my office.
Okay.
I don't have that electronic.
That's fine. If someone could get me that later, I'd appreciate it. I'd also, I mean, I don't know if you guys have sent around, I'd love to see that study, that Kimberly Horn study, if you could share that with the committee.
Alderman Coder, it's a huge binder of, several reams of paper that gets updated. But I mean, we can let you borrow it because we'd have to make, I mean, It's a
No, that's fine.
large binder.
Even an executive summary or something would be fine. I don't want a huge binder.
Okay.
Okay. Could someone also speak to, Michelle, you referenced that there's about 125,000 in increased security costs that I think you said was, let's see, looking at the budget highlights document, it references some increased security for City Hall, and where is that in my notes? Could you talk about that increase in security for Keel and City Hall and couples? It's 125,000. What are we doing there?
That security has to do with contracting with Hudson Security for some roving services that deal with just kind of perusing through the different facilities, making sure things are secure, as well as some specific things for Keel and City Hall. We've had a lot of different issues, unfortunately, relating to the homeless situation and different things that have transpired that we're in the process of trying to deal with that, and with a combination of security as well as the cameras that were talked about. Just a measure of trying to make sure that things are secure. We're also looking into trying to move away from Hudson, which is an outside contractor, to trying to do more things with possibly the sheriff's office, because the Hudson security is really getting to be extremely high. And so there's an opportunity to do some partnering with the sheriff's office to provide some of that security at a lower cost. So in actuality, this would have been higher, but we're looking to do that as a means of trying to save some money and to support other city organizations.
And Michelle, on the subject of some of those security concerns, specifically on the City Hall lot, and I know you guys have been working on this, and I know there's been some folks from the Board of Aldermen involved. Are the city marshals a part of that conversation? Are they taking any responsibility for securing that lot, or is that falling solely on you guys?
Alderman Coder, to your point, they are not. They have turned down requests to actively patrol and monitor activity that's outside of City Hall.
Okay, so they stop at the gates, I guess, or at the doors.
Unfortunately.
Okay. All right, and then my next question, I guess, deals with, I think it was the first document that the treasurer Michelle shared, which was the color-coded sort of budget summary here, revenues 2019 actual through 2021 budget. I just want to make sure I'm understanding these columns when we got that up. Is the pink column is the budget we're talking about today, isn't it? The
yes,
second.
it is.
Okay. And what was the green column, the budget 2021? Is that what was originally submitted to the parking commission?
That was the original, yes, the very original budget, yes.
Okay, and then you mentioned there was like 3 iterations, so I'm assuming the orange one in between those is the second iteration, the 16.9 million.
That's actually the projection for 20, not 21, because we were trying to get a handle on what was happening with 20, so that we could springboard off of that as 21.
All right, got it. So then we're looking. All right, so the pink is our current budget. All right, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Chairman, I'll shut up for now. I'll probably have a couple more questions in a few minutes, but that's it for right now.
Okay, Alderwoman Martin.
No questions right now.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I'm coming. My phone's acting crazy. I just have a couple of questions. One of the questions that I have is, you said a reduction in revenue, even with ticketing not stopped in other cities. And so, do you know why they had a reduction in the revenue, even though they were still ticketing people? Was it something with the pandemic that stopped them from collecting the money, or?
Alderwoman Boyd, because even those cities that continue to enforce, there was nothing to enforce. So, you know, their amount of enforcement or the cars available to enforce also decreased with a lot of people sheltering in place and not going outside of their homes. So there wasn't much left to enforce.
Okay, and then you said that you had an increase in supplies due to sanitation.
Alderwoman Boyd.
That's why you had increased it.
I'm sorry, you went out.
About dollar amount in your supplies. And
I'm sorry, I can't hear the question.
did you hear me?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh God, I'm sorry. And I know I'm going in and out. That's what I texted the treasurer and said I'm going in and out. So you might not and might will hear me. I've been having problems all morning. You said you had an increase in supplies. Did you get that?
Yes.
Ma'am. Okay. And so you said it was due to sanitation.
Part of it is due to sanitation, about 25,000 of it. Because we're planning to do way more scrubbing and you know, additional, you know, type of sanitation with this COVID-19 being out here. We're doing more procedures of making sure things are sterilized.
So my question is, are you all going to apply for the CARE Act dollars to get reimbursed?
Yes, ma'am. As soon as we're waiting on a message from the mayor's office on that process. I haven't received anything yet as far as how to apply for, you know, to be reimbursed for all of our expenses related to COVID.
Okay, and so you had your because I'm sorry, Madam Treasurer, I always call them wrong and I don't want to disrespect them. The people that passed the tickets out, they were off because you took them off the street. So were you able to put them in other areas in the Treasury Department to utilize them while they weren't able to write the tickets?
No, ma'am. There weren't any other things for them to do because there were already staff in other places. There were a couple of our parking attendant staff that rotated to our janitorial and maintenance staff temporarily, but other than that, no, ma'am.
Okay, and then on your facility and grounds, in 2019, you had a negative 250, and then you budgeted 200 for 2020. So can you explain that one to me, please?
Facility and grounds?
Facility and grounds.
Okay, that's the 5538. Okay. That deals with the, like I was saying earlier, in the rental agreements that we have through our tenants with Gershman Property. Their leases allow them to have tenant improvements at different points in time throughout their lease. They have the right to opt to exercise those. And so we always budget what those are based on the lease.
With the, I know about the street cleaning, and at first people were moving their cars, and my frustration now, you know, I feel that now the parking ticket employees are going to be challenged because, and if I'm off, tell me, they're going to be challenged because they're going to be writing an astronomical amount of tickets because people don't believe that, you know, even though you putting them back to work, people don't feel that they're going to be ticketed. And so I know they're going to have an extra amount of tickets they're going to have to write. So do you have the manpower to start enforcing that when you go back to passing tickets?
We still have several parking enforcement officers who are taking care of either family or loved ones who or children who haven't gone back to school. Closed. So we are going to phase in their return starting June 1st. So all 30 officers will not be back on June 1st. We'll phase them in based on their availability that we've surveyed with the help of HR to see what their particular situations are.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay, Alderman Bosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly appreciate the presentation and all the effort work put into it. I do have a few questions. I'm still kind of working my way through the rest of these fiscal this information that we got in these papers. So if you can just come back around to me.
Okay, I could do that. Alderman Middlebrook, good morning.
Good morning. I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Madam Treasurer, can you talk to us about the booting program that's been suspended almost a year?
So for the edification of the committee, there was a report on KMOV that talked about some fraud and abuse in the booting, in the towing division or in the towing department, where cars were taken home by employees, and we thought it best to halt booting at that time. We're still waiting for a complete report from the streets director as to what happened with those employees and an assurance that this sort of fraud would not happen in the future.
Can you tell us, I kind of vaguely remember that report. Was that July or August or something like that? Was it, do you remember when that was?
June of last year, I believe.
And you're waiting on a report from who?
Commissioner Wilson.
Okay. Because it's my understanding that there was a full investigation done and that nobody went to jail. There was some disciplinary action taken upon some employees, but it wasn't as prevalent as it may have been presented in the news media. And that's been many months ago. Help me understand, if we're one city and the street department has corrected, taken corrective action within their department for what went wrong, why are we as another department demanding some type of thorough explanation before we get back to work?
Well, in the spirit of transparency, which I'm sure that you are supportive of, we asked for a thorough written report and have never received it.
Oh, so it's my understanding, because there's a lot of personnel actions that took place, that none of us are privy to that particular information as far as the employee disciplinary, but they hired a commissioner, I believe, and they've kind of just moved on. And can you tell us potentially how much revenue that we have lost because we have not been booting?
We don't know. That revenue doesn't come to us.
Okay. But you do get your parking, we get, as a parking commission, we get the parking fines paid before the boot comes off, correct?
Yes.
So there is an opportunity where we're missing revenue opportunities because we're not booting. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. Well, that piece, only about 15,000, we only lost about $15,000 by not booting cars and towing cars.
How do you?
There are vehicles that are still being towed that we report that we receive through actions from the CSB for abandoned cars and other safety violations. So we will still report those to the towing division to have those towed.
Okay. You have my commitment that whatever you're due as far as this booting issue, that you will get that report so that we can move on with the business usual, because I would think that not booting cars has a negative impact on the revenue at the end of the day. I'm not sure how you calculated 15,000, but you know, it could be more than that. So I will make sure that you get that as chairman of Streets, Refuse, and Traffic, that you get the document, whatever information that they can give. I did have some preliminary conversations, and there was a lot of stuff that they can't give. So we want to make sure that we do that so the parking division can be 100% in operation as best as possible, especially during these times where revenues looks like they will be down. Let's see here.
You wanted to know the unrestricted reserves, and when I took office in 2013, according to the 2013-2014 audit of the parking division, that number of unrestricted reserves was 15 million.
That's 15 million. Thank you. Let's circle back around. Is Alderman Coder still there?
I'm still here, Chairman. Thanks. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. And I appreciate, we got a lot of documentation in advance today. I'm trying to look at it on a separate computer while we do both of these things. Could maybe Jared or the treasurer speak to sort of generally the contracting processes for your office? I know this has been a source of litigation involving the circuit attorney, and there's a recent ruling on that. And I'm sort of wondering, in light of that and just sort of contracting, are you guys, I see some contracts signed by Jared, some by the treasurer. There's certain things that seem to have resolutions of the parking commission. Could you walk me through your existing contracting processes, and are there any plans to change that in light of Judge Moriarty's recent ruling? I know contracts, I think, are supposed to be approved, you know, to form by the city councilor and then countersigned by the comptroller just to certify that the funds are available. Can you guys speak to that at all?
Sure. So our contracting process is dependent upon the contract. We do put out for RFP large contracts like other municipal entities. The contracting power under the state laws that govern our office were shared by both the treasurer and the parking commission. There's also separate authority, unlike the circuit attorney, in city law that allows the treasurer to enter into her own contracts.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for that clarity. That's all I've got for now, Chairman.
Alderman Martin.
Thank you. I have a question. Is it my understanding that the salaries are projected to go down in the treasurer's office, but up in on the parking division?
I'm sorry.
is it my understanding that the salaries are going down in the treasurer's office, but they're going up for parking?
No, we held everyone at the same level. There
Okay.
are only 3 employees that are getting an increase, and that is because of classification, move into a different classification, and those are in treasury operations.
Okay. I was looking just at the in the parking division for actual 2019 and projected fiscal 2020, and then 2021. Okay, I see the difference now. Projected fiscal 2020, it's going down a little bit. It went up from 2019 to 2020, but then going down a little bit for 2021.
Right.
It just looked different to me than, and I may be reading it wrong, than when I looked at the overall budget. So, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Pam Boyd.
I have no questions.
Okay, Alderman Bosley. Alderman Bosley. Can somebody unmute? There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was wondering kind of with everything that's going on, and we do have kind of an expected lower amount of revenue that we'll be bringing in, and that's, I think, across every working department that brings income in with these, with COVID, of course. Do you have any, I guess, innovative ideas that you all maybe been speaking about, and how we can possibly gain other revenues? Kind of. So this is just an idea of mine. For example, we have. I think we're going to have a lot of people outside when things really open back up. So because people may not be using public transportation as much, you may have a lot more cars. So with that, it may be an opportunity for us to be strict on social distancing, but at the same time, regenerate some of that revenue that was lost, just due to being, I think, strict on the amount of people that can congregate in certain areas. Because I think if I remember correctly, we still have rules in place, for a certain amount of people in per space, based on, once again, our rules and social distancing. So if you thought about, once again, any ways that you'll be able to capitalize on that in itself?
Sure, Alderman Bosley. We're part of conversations with special events and the street department to potentially allow businesses to take over additional private property, additional sidewalks, and potentially streets. So that would hopefully generate, additional economic activity for the city. But in terms of policing that activity, in terms of making sure people are socially distancing, I don't think our office really has the expertise. So we're happy to be a part of those conversations to help people get back to work and to help people do things a little differently. But we honestly need help from, we're gonna need help from other departments that might be a little better at enforcing social distancing and other safety issues. But we're always around to listen.
Understand, and I definitely don't expect your office to take on a task like that. So I just make sure I was not implying that. So I do appreciate that. Just once again, just thinking of ways we can make some extra money, especially when it comes down to us kind of having these restrictions. And I think people kind of need to see us being serious about a lot of stuff. And once again, your office is one of those places I think that should be a part of conversations like that. But I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Bosley. One of the things that that I've been doing personally is trying to engage as many people as possible to show the importance of wearing masks when you do leave the house or you're in public places. I'm working with a small group of media influencers to start like a hashtag called Mask On to influence people, especially younger people, which is where I feel that the resistance is the largest, to wear masks as they're in public. So that's, and that's just me as a public official, not necessarily related to the treasurer's office.
No, I mean, that's nice, and that's definitely important. I mean, so, and once again, I just want to throw this out there. As the summer gets a little warmer, we definitely gonna see a lot more cars out, especially younger people that may not have licenses. I mean, and once again, it's not your office to ensure that the rules are enforced, but it would be nice to, especially in my area in particular, that when we see, we've had a lot of shootings over the last few weeks, and that's just keeping it real. I think the more cars that are off the streets and more individuals know that, hey, if you park in the wrong area, you're going to get a ticket or things like that, the less people you got hanging out, the more, less likely it is that you'll have certain things happening. But, just ways we all can kind of work together. But that's here nor there. I wanted to throw that out there.
I hear you. Yeah, it's like kind of stepping up enforcement in areas where people normally congregate. If there are no parking zones, just go ahead and make sure that we're enforcing that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and it'll make them not want to be where they really don't have to be. And that's just, everybody want to get outside, and we are going to utilize the spaces where we're not supposed to park at to do it. And that's just being real. Right. But I would definitely love to have kind of a statement made that we want you to be safe. And, it's not even just about COVID for real at this point. We got a lot of people that's been in the house that got anxiety from being there. So you got, a lot of stuff built up. I would love to keep my people safe. And I know that's one of the ways to do it. Sometimes you got to restrict behavior.
Gotcha.
Or at least have an atmospheric change that, hey, you work here again because but once again, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions.
Okay, Jared, I want to circle back around with you. You said something that struck me as kind of odd. You said the treasurer has some type of authority where the treasurer can engage in contracts unilaterally, basically. Is that, did I hear you correctly?
They'd say city code provides the treasurer with the ability to enter into contracts.
Okay, now I'm a little familiar with city code and different city ordinances that give certain departments and certain individuals an opportunity to engage in contracts, but they can't do it if it's inconsistent with the charter, right?
If it's inconsistent with the charter, I don't.
Yeah. So
I don't think there are ordinances that are, well, I don't think that our contracting authority is in opposition to the charter.
Because when I think of, city departments and how they issue contracts and they do RFPs, and then the RFP selection come up with, who they think should represent the city, then they get to the contract language, and then the contract has to be vetted by the city council's office. It has to go to the comptroller to make sure we have funding to be able to even engage that contract. The registrar has to have it registered on file. I think the comptroller even signs off on it. The city council signs off on it. I'm not sure if the mayor. I just reflect back when I was a recipient of Black grant funding back in the 90s and jumped through a whole lot before that contract was issued, because they had to go through a lot of different processes with city government. And certainly in the spirit of transparency, I just can't believe that we would have a department that can just act on contracts on their own with no oversight. Does that make practical sense to you?
I think we're happy to, like I said, release our contracts. We have a contracting process that requires a lot with larger contracts that they be publicly bid out. So I think, like I said, we're more than willing to show folks where our contracts are, and I think we're within our authority, like I said, under city law to enter into these contracts. But like I said, we do have safeguards in place for RFPs, and I think those, like I said, we're more than happy to discuss the contents of contracts and have freely provided those in short notice.
Well, certainly I appreciate there was a request from the committee, certain members that wanted to know the typical type of contracts that the treasurer's office has been engaged in, and I had a chance to look through as many as possible over the weekend, and I was kind of curious. I came across one by DreamWorks, I believe it is. There's a $5,000 contract to provide some social media services, increase followers for the treasurer, and it was quite interesting. It never came to the parking commission, and I'm just kind of curious, since the parking commission never identified it as a budget item, how did we enter into a contract with somebody for COVID-19 that had absolutely nothing to do with the parking division?
I would say that contract falls within an approved budget item 1. 2, we are at it with regard to kind of the parking commission's ability to enter into contracts. The city councilor doesn't feel the parking commission actually does have the ability to enter into contracts right now. So, that is the reason why contracts, but the ability for the treasurer to enter into contracts still remains.
I'm not sure if that's correct, Jared. I would find that very hard to believe, and here's why I would suggest that. So let's move on to the Hudson contract, because that was one of the contracts. Now, I remember in February the 10th, I think was the date, it was first presented to the Parking Commission. It was on the agenda, we spoke about it, and there were some issues about whether or not it conformed to city code, city law. And back to you in the city council's office. And then there was another opportunity where it was on the agenda, and I know I raised issues about that company not paying its personal property taxes. Now, I since learned that on that subsequent meeting, that between the February and 10th meeting and that meeting, that it did get paid, and so that was a good thing. But I did have anxieties about whether or not the Hudson and Associates was financially solvent enough to be able to carry out a multi-million-dollar contract. So it was still on the agenda, and I'm not sure how did a contract get executed when you were put on notice by the city council's office that it was not in true form, and that clearly the parking commission should have voted on that and before it was executed. So I'm just kind of confused about transparency and honesty, integrity, and people working together. I mean, just maybe I'm wrong, but help me understand, kind of clear that up, because the charter says something that you're not saying. So I'm listening.
Sure. So I've pulled up Mike Garvin's email from looks like April. After we went back and forth with the city councilor's office, the city councilor said the parking commission lacks the capacity to contract. That capacity to contract was previously provided by state law, which the city councilor's office has taken the position right now is unconstitutional pending appeal. What remains, as I stated before, is the treasurer's ability in city law to enter into contracts. Therefore, we could not, based on this is the city councilor. saying the parking commission lacks the capacity to contract. So after that, we could not ask you to do something as in the parking commission, which the city councilor believes is not possible.
Okay, I'm going to make a call to the city council's office to get the city council on this because that makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to forward the email that was sent by Mike Garvin.
No, I understand that, but Jared,
should I send on the committee? Who should I send this to on the committee?
you can send it to the chairman.
Okay.
But I'm not a lawyer. I pretend to be one oftentimes. But I would think that if the city council, and I can't speak for the city council, but I'm just trying to walk through this thing logically. If the city council is suggesting that the parking commission cannot enter into contracts, that would mean the parking commission giving approval and then the treasurer signing off on it, that stopped. That had to cease and desist. But the parking commission still has a role to be able to approve contracts, I would think, because here's the deal. There's an RFP process. The RFP, the committee set up was members, a staff of the treasurer's office, correct?
Yes, there were folks from the relevant departments that were part of the RFP committee.
What do you mean relevant departments?
Well, in terms of it involves a great deal of IT, so information technology department, and then parking operations.
Okay, so IT is a sub department within the parking department.
That's correct.
Okay, so but the parking commission, I would think, would have an intimate role in whether or not this should move forward. Wouldn't you agree? Because the parking commission or people that's outside of the parking commission, I mean, that would be like somebody in the building division having a contract or RFP vetted by the building commissioner, the supervisor and inspections, and somebody else already within that department. I mean, how do you trust the fidelity of that process, right? And so if you go back to state statute, you know, I hate to use this as an analogy, but the parking commission was oversight because there were people on the parking commission that were not directly involved in the day-to-day operations. And so therefore, I think you can kind of trust if the parking commission has people that are not within the parking division, that they would do their due diligence and that there would be appropriate oversight. But what you are suggesting to me that you think is transparent, if people within the same department vet an RFP and make an award.
You just said a lot there, but I just sent the email to the committee. We started the RFP process to look at new parking vendors in 2019, in the spring of 2019, and we notified the parking commission at such time. We went through a process that took over a year, and we presented on multiple occasions to the parking commission on our findings and the underlying rationale behind the selections. We hope and presented the fact that we're going to both improve service and achieve savings, which was the objective of the RFP. We had several companies that responded to the RFP, and like I said, it was the process took place over a year. And we started the process in an environment when we thought state statutes governed our office, and those state statutes provided the parking commission with the ability to enter into contracts, and we had no qualms with that. And as a result, like I said, try to involve the parking commission in providing an update. The city has taken a position that they think that the parking statutes under state law that provide the capacity to contract are unconstitutional, and we're in court about that right now. And as a result, we ended the RFP process with the different legal kind of regime than we started. And additionally, based upon kind of the operational needs of our office, and the fact that we absolutely needed a new parking vendor to see better service and better savings. We had to move forward with kind of the legal rationale we had, which is, like I said, the city's city law that allows the treasurer to enter into contracts. So that is, and we negotiated in good faith with the city councilor's office about kind of a way forward for several weeks, if not months. And like I said, this email that I submitted to the committee was an email that was sent, like I said, after several weeks of trying to find some way forward with the city councilor's office, and based upon the city councilor's input. So that is how we entered into our contract with Hudson, that we think is going to provide the city better service at a lower cost.
So you think that because the city councilor disagreed with you to the form of the contract, and that the parking commission had reservations, that you would just go around the parking commission and the city council's office? And matter of fact, this question is not for you, Madam Treasurer. This is for you. So you feel it was okay, in the spirit of transparency and integrity, that you would go around the city councilor and you would go around the parking commission when you were already moving through a process to get the contract awarded? You felt it was okay to just execute it and not even tell anybody?
We did not go around the city councilor, as Jared explained earlier. We went back and forth with the city councilor several times for several months, form and what was in the contract. And at the end of the day, City Councilor Julian Bush said that the parking commission did not have contracting authority. So based on that and our attorney's advice, we went ahead and executed the contract. It was no secret. All commission members were aware that we were entering into this contract. And it was no secret. You had all of the RFPs, and we had been going through this process for at least a year. The RFP process started a year ago for us to get a new parking vendor for the Parking Violations Bureau and meter maintenance and collections.
Okay, STL TV, if you could please send a link to Mike Garvin from the city council's office so he can get on this call. We cannot finish this meeting without the city council's office clarifying the remarks. Madam Treasurer, let me ask you this. Did you consult your attorney before you executed this contract?
Absolutely.
And your attorney gave you the go-ahead that it would be appropriate?
Absolutely.
And what's the attorney's name?
Chuck Hatfield.
Who?
Chuck Hatfield.
Chuck Hatfield. Okay, so what I heard you say was that basically you gave the parking commission an opportunity to support this contract. You gave the city council's office an opportunity to support this contract. And because you had more of a sense of urgency than following what the charter suggests, you execute the contract.
No, that is not what I said. I said that we went back and forth with the city councilor as to form and content of the contract. And when the city councilor and us had an agreement, he then went to Julian Bush with the contract, and Julian Bush responded that the parking commission does not have authority to contract, only the parking supervisor. And so we took that information to our attorney, and our attorney agreed that based on the city code that's in chapter 15 of city code, that the treasurer as parking supervisor can make and pay and enter into contracts.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, just out of just mutual respect, the parking commission was reviewing a contract by Hudson, correct?
Correct.
I raised a question about my concern of their financial ability to be able to execute a multi-million-dollar contract. Is that correct?
You raised some questions at the last meeting where we discussed the Hudson Contract.
I also asked if they would appear before the parking commission to give further explanation as to their ability to execute the contract. Is that not correct?
You did.
Okay, so in saying that, I was never made aware that you were going to go ahead and execute the contract, even though I had some concerns about it. Would that be fair to say?
That's fair.
Okay, and so the city councilor, Mike Garvin, sent the email and was trying to explain that the contract was not in the right form to be executed under the city's code. And there was obviously, it seems to be, there's a disagreement with lawyers because your lawyer, Chuck Hatfield, disagreed with our city councilor who has to represent the city of St. Louis, and the contract was executed.
No, sir. Julian Bush, through his message, basically gave us the permission to enter into that contract.
Okay, Mike Garvin, I see you're on the phone. Can Mike Garvin be unmuted, please? Mike, can you clarify what's being said, because I'm just totally confused.
Yes, some of the inferences that have been going around are incorrect. I did discuss various iterations of the Hudson contract with Jared Boyd, and including the fact that the comptroller would have to sign and the city councilor would have to sign. In the version that was actually executed, those things were omitted. There is no signature line for the comptroller, and there is no approval as to form line for the city councilor. So the suggestion that somehow the inability of the parking commission to execute a contract is the only difference, that's false. No matter how you look at this contract, it is unlawful and illegal. The comptroller needs to sign. That's a fact, and it was recently confirmed in the circuit attorney litigation that I think Alderman Coder mentioned. It doesn't matter. There is no iteration that can do without the comptroller's signature. We were very clear with that, and what happened during our discussions was we agreed on various things, and then they were taken out before the contract was executed.
I don't agree with that.
Getting to the point of the parking commission's ability to enter a contract, the code does say that the treasurer can enter contracts on behalf of the parking commission, and meaning the city. That doesn't mean she has unilateral authority. For instance, BPS has authority to enter contracts for public works. The charter requirements still have to be filled. They have to send their contracts to the comptroller and to the city councilor for signature. Just because someone has authority to be the signatory on a contract doesn't mean they can ignore the charter requirements for that contract. So all these arguments are simply false, and some of to the extent they're trying to attribute any of this to a city councilor opinion or recommendation is false.
Okay. So Jared, go ahead and unmute Jared. So Jared, and is Mike Garvin right that he explained to you they should have a comptroller signature on that contract?
The comptroller basically certifies that there are enough funds in the contract,
that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm asking, Jared. I'm asking based on a contract that the city is engaging in, whether it's signed off by the treasurer or whoever, would you agree that it should have a line, and were you made aware from the city councilor's office that it should have a line to be signed by the comptroller so that the comptroller can certify that the funds will be available?
I would have to go back and look at my notes for that. I did talk with our attorney about the issue of the city councilor's office, certifying that it be reviewed to form. We don't think that is something that is essential for the enforceability of a contract based upon his analysis.
Okay, so now on to another court battle. That's basically what I'm hearing, because the city councilor is saying it's not enforceable and it's basically illegal. And I think that you and the treasurer knew what you were doing, and this is just my opinion, and took an opportunity to just do it the way you want to do it. And here's the reason I say that, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair that you put the parking commission through, this process as if their voice matters. And then when it looks like it was lingering too long, you just move on without even informing the parking commission. I mean, at least the parking commission could have been informed. Wouldn't you agree that Madam Treasurer, don't you think the parking commission should have been informed that you were going to execute the contract? And if we had issues, we could have said, hey, wait a minute. I thought you were negotiating and trying to figure this out with the city council's office. Wouldn't you think that'd have been fair, Madam Treasurer, in the spirit of transparency?
In the spirit of transparency, you had all of the contracts and all of the RFPs. And then also, this was already decided as far as if the comptroller had to be a co-signer on the contract in the 2009 lawsuit against the treasurer's office, which was also the original parking outsourcing lawsuit. That decision was already decided and upheld by the Eastern District Missouri Court of Appeals.
Under the state law, correct?
Well, it was the treasurer's office as parking supervisor was involved in that lawsuit.
But you were operating according to state law, correct?
We started this process under state law. The treasurer is the parking supervisor as a result of state law, whether there's a parking commission or not.
So let me ask you this, Madam Treasurer. So if the judge orders an injunction in the middle of a process that says you shall not operate the way you used to operate, should you follow the current law in which the judge implies, or do you violate the injunction and move on as business as usual?
Well, the current law in Chapter 15 of City Code says that the treasurer can enter into contracts.
Okay,
and
but the city council
still does not require a co-signer of the comptroller's office. The comptroller is there just to make sure that the parking division, which is an enterprise fund, has the funds to pay to satisfy the contract.
Okay, but the city council's office represents the city of St. Louis, correct?
They are right now, because we are in an active lawsuit that you are a part of, they are opposite to us, so we cannot count on the city councilor's office to represent us.
Yeah, they're not allowed to. It's what's called adverse to our office.
So it doesn't matter what the city council's office says. You're going to just take the advice of your attorney. Would that be a fair assessment?
No, the issue is, like I said, at the end of negotiations, the city councilor took the position that the parking commission did not actually have the authority or the capacity to enter into the contract.
But as Mike Garvin just said, although the code says that the code cannot usurp charter, he just explained that the president of BPS can sign the contract, but you still has to go through the city's process, right? Did you hear him say that?
Our process matches the city's.
I'm sorry.
We're in a different chapter
we are in a different chapter.
The city
we are not mentioned in Chapter 3 that you are referring to. We are mentioned in Chapter 15.
But the charter is still the charter, correct? No matter what code you're in.
What might be helpful for the committee, we can provide I'll talk to our attorney about providing an opinion on kind of the basis of our, because I think that would be helpful for the committee as opposed to us kind of talking over one another.
Right, but I'm the chairman, so I'm just going to say this. I'm confused, and I think maybe somebody's being disingenuous. We have a city councilor. The parking division is now operating under city code, period. You must respond to whatever the decision is of the city councilor. Now, notwithstanding a lawsuit on the Supreme Court appeal, the city councilor's opinion is what matters because they represent the city of St. Louis.
But the city councilor is still adverse to us at this point.
But you can't keep using the fact that they're adverse to you to circumvent, to circumvent the codes on the charter.
It would not be adverse to us. If you weren't in an active lawsuit against the parking division and the parking commission, they would not be adverse to us, and we could use the city councilor's office a lot more and other things as well.
Well, I feel like I'm helping you. I mean, 8 years ago, you felt that the parking should have been part of city government. Is that correct?
We're not going to go through this again.
But am I correct? 8 years ago, you felt that the city parking had no business in the treasurer's office and should be part of city government. So I'm not sure why you adverse to what I'm doing that makes good sense. It's something I got from you.
Well, that's what you're running on now, so run your race.
But I got it from you, and this is not about the race. This is about policy.
That's flattering, Alderman Boyd. That's really flattering.
Okay, let me go back to the committee for questions. No, before that, let me go back to Madam Treasurer. Help me understand why parking is paying for treasury stuff that has to do with COVID-19.
As parking supplements the treasury budget on a lot of things, because the budget division consistently turns us down on additional requests for staff, additional requests for supplies and equipment. So parking has always supplemented treasury operations.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I would think that the parking, a budget revision would have come before the parking commission, and then we would have just allocated the money to do that.
The funds were already in our marketing budget. They were already allocated.
But the marketing budget has to do with parking, not to do with treasury operations, though, because in the contract of DreamWorks, it talks about edifying the Twitter followers for the treasurer.
And I run
wait a minute, to deal with COVID-19 and financial literacy, correct?
Yes, and financial literacy is supplemented by the parking division.
Well, let me ask you this. Do it even matter about having a parking commission anymore? Will the parking commission even meet and have, a general concern or oversight for anything going on in parking?
You're able to call meetings.
But I'm asking you, in your opinion, I mean, if certain things don't matter, here's my concern. I don't think that, under your opinion, that there's any room for oversight, and that concerns me.
That's not true, Alderman Boyd. I mean, and in our RFP policy, this contract falls under $5,000 or $5,000 and under. So I can enter into this contract per our RFP policy, that I can enter into this contract without further approval of the parking division. So am I supposed to bring every single contract, when we purchase supplies for COVID-19, when we purchase hand sanitizer, when we purchase masks, am I supposed to bring every contract to the parking commission? Is that what you want?
I would think so, because here's what's confusing to me with you saying that parking supplements the treasurer's office. So it doesn't matter how the budget is put forth. We pass the treasurer's budget with one set of numbers, which is a whole different set of books. And then we pass the parking commission budget over here, let's say, right? And so it really doesn't matter what we put in different buckets within that budget. You as treasurer would just spend it the way you want to. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. That's not correct at all. I mean, just like any other independently elected official has the opportunity to spend money within all budget categories already allocated to his or her office.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we're doing things right. And it just looks like, there was a little lack of transparency, and I don't want to be personally part of a lawsuit because I was supposed to do something that I didn't do. So I just want a process that everybody can, agree to in the best interest of the city of St. Louis. So I'll just open it up for follow-up questions from the committee. Alderman Coder.
Thanks, Chairman. I guess, Madam Treasurer, you just mentioned marketing, that, the DreamWorks contract's a marketing expense. Where does that fall? What budget item does that fall under? Do you consider that a professional service?
That falls in the Office of Financial Empowerment under Is that's not where it is, Jared? Where is that? I thought it
Michelle.
was under.
Michelle would know. It might be on CR.
So is that a contract? Is that marketing expense out of the Office of Financial Empowerment budget, which is part of the treasurer's office budget?
We have two. We have two buckets of marketing. I don't know if Michelle can unmute herself or if she has to be back to the TV.
TV, unmute her.
I'm sorry, everybody's breaking up. I'm not understanding what.
I heard
the question, but.
Okay, then let's leave it. I guess, Michelle, you heard my question. The marketing expense is this Dream whatever contract and sort of marketing in general. Is that a budget? Is that a line item in the treasurer office budget? I don't see anything regarding marketing in the parking budget unless I'm missing it.
Marketing and those types of expenses in both treasury and parking would be under professional services.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. My next question, I guess, and this might be for you, Michelle, you talked about some of those tenant improvements you need to make per your leases. That's for commercial tenants in your I guess your couples building there, right? The one connected to the garage.
That's for our commercial tenants anywhere.
Okay.
All our properties.
So I guess we're budgeting for that in light of, what's going on with COVID and everything else. I mean, have we given any, I guess, rent abatements or forbearances to existing tenants that would be, receiving some of these tenant improvements?
There have been some rent abatements that have been moved to the end of their lease. We've had a couple of tenants that requested a break at the moment, but those payments are being moved to the end of their lease. It's not like they're, not going to pay that, but
okay.
And
so
I'm sure that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sure that at the moment, the tenant improvements that are in the budget do not relate to any of those tenants.
That was what I was getting at. Thank you. Okay, hold on one second here. That's really all let's see here. I just want to confirm we're budgeting. You've got a 0 for any sort of travel for this year and 0 for any sort of transportation in this budget. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
All right. All right, nothing further right now. Thanks.
Okay, Alderwoman Martin.
No questions.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd. Yes, Alderwoman Pam Boyd. You look unmuted.
Okay, no questions.
Okay, Alderman Bosley. Alderman Bosley? Where did it just go? Can you unmute Alderman Bosley?
Sorry about that. No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, let me ask you a question about a couple of contracts. So CCG Asset Management, who is that exactly?
Brandon Comer.
Okay, and then there's Comer Capital, correct?
Comer Capital Group Asset Management.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I was looking at a couple of contracts. One of them says PFM. And within PFM, it includes Comer Capital. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you explain that contract a little bit for me?
Yeah. PFM is our asset manager or our investment advisor. When we bid that contract back in 2013, we bid it for a large manager and an emerging manager. So PFM bid with Comer Capital to manage the city's investments. PFM manages the city's portfolio. Comer Capital Asset Management, which is a subsidiary or separate entity of Comer Capital, manages the bond funds.
Okay.
And just for clarification's sake, we probably provide, this is actually a treasury contract that Shirley provided to you all.
Mm-hmm.
We do expend funds for the portion of the assets that are invested on the parking side, but the airport and every other department that is responsible for their share of assets pays at the same rate. So this is in our kind of efforts to get you as many contracts as possible. This is really a treasury contract, but we do expend some parking funds for the portion of the investments that are parking dollars, but the vast majority of the funds are paid by other city departments.
So can you tell me what Comer's percentages of the PFM contract is? Basically, how much money a month is that?
It would depend upon what how much money the city has invested, and like I said, we only incur a very small portion of that contract, and the other assets under management are reviewed by departments like the airport and the water department.
Okay.
So we're only seeing a small portion, like I said, of what's invested.
And
we're only paying for a small portion of what's invested.
Right. Okay, that makes a little more sense. And as far as Comer Capital, so they're only investing parking revenues. Is that right?
No, that's not the case. They're investing largely funds that deal with bond proceeds. That could
the entire city's bond portfolio.
For the entire city's bond proceeds.
Right. But it seems like I saw somewhere. So it looks like Comer Capital contract reads financial advising on investments as well as non-investments. For example, he's on this call right now, so he's entitled, he's earning, I think it was like $3,000 a month in non-investment work. Is that correct?
He is the parking division's financial advisor.
Right, and he earns $3,000 a month on bond stuff, maybe that's what non-investment stuff.
He earns $3,000 a month as the parking division's financial advisor. So that could include and is not limited to investments, our bonds, our current bond indentures, any future bond indentures, our financial, our credit ratings.
I'm trying to find the contract, please forgive me, but I believe his contract under Comer Capital says he gets a certain percentage of investments. Am I correct in remembering that somewhere? In addition to
PFM and Comer Capital Asset is one contract.
That's right. For asset management.
Right, and for asset management, and then Comer Capital as a financial advisor is a separate contract.
Right, and so I'm only talking about Comer Capital right now. So I thank you for clearing that up. I clearly understand now there's a sharing of costs with his services with all the city departments across the city. But now I'm talking about just Comer Capital, because in Comer Capital's contract, I believe it says $3,000 a month in addition to if there's some investments, you get a certain yield. I think it was 10% or something like that. Maybe Mr. Comer can clear it up. Mr. Comer, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
So what percentage, break your contract down for me.
I think what's being misunderstood are bond transactions versus investments. As the financial advisor to the treasurer's office, we do receive the monthly compensation you mentioned for things that the treasurer mentioned, which include the bond ratings, budget prep and analysis, reserve analysis, all the various things that we participate in on an ongoing basis. The parking division also issues debt. And so what you're referencing as it relates to a quote unquote percentage are actually our transactional fees for when we actually do a bond deal on behalf of the parking division, including the several refunding bonds that we've identified for the parking division and executed to result in savings for the parking division.
Okay, let me ask you this. There's a reserve and a reserve fund, restricted and unrestricted. So those monies are invested somewhere, correct?
Yes, most of the reserves are invested.
Are you responsible for making those investment decisions?
No, we're not. Those are considered operating funds of the parking division, and therefore they would be invested by PFM.
Okay, so you do no investments of actual outside of bonds.
That is correct.
Okay, well, that clears that up. Okay, I don't have any more questions. I'll circle back around with the committee and then we'll try to wrap this up for today. Alderman Coder.
Nothing further.
Okay, Alderwoman Martin.
Nothing further, thank you.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I just have a question for the treasurer, because the question I had asked earlier was about the COVID and you getting your dollars back. Who did you reach out to? Because I'm just kind of concerned because you need to be able to get your reimbursement like other departments.
Steve Conway was on a call with us and said he would contact us about the process to be reimbursed. To my knowledge, that has not happened.
Okay, I could ask them to follow up, Madam Treasurer, because that's not fair to your department as to any others, to make sure that you get your reimbursement also.
Thank you, appreciate that.
No problem.
Alderman Box. Alderman Bosley, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
A connection is shut. Are you frozen right now?
Yes. Are you having questions? You're breaking up.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no question. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Alderman Bosley. Okay, let's go ahead and mute. Let's go ahead and mute Alderman Bosley.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. So, Madam Treasurer, I want to make sure that you get your report about this booting situation. And matter of fact, Mike Garvin, are you still there? Can you unmute Mike Garvin?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, so is there any reason that the treasurer is not entitled to whatever report that she's asking for? I want to make sure that she gets the report that she's asking for.
The report from the street director?
Correct.
I don't know exactly what kind of report they're looking for. You know, as you said, we can't, some personnel matters are confidential. I'm not familiar with the problem or what sort of report she's waiting for, but I'll check with Jamie Wilson about that.
Okay. Madam Treasurer, if you would send me that email that you sent to Jamie Wilson asking for what you need, then I'm real clear what your expectations are so that I can get you what you're looking for, you know. So that's on that. I am a little concerned about this contract issue, and I'm still kind of confused, and I'm sorry, and I apologize if I came off, you know, frustrated, but you know, when I get confused and I keep getting conflicting stories from this side and that side, it is frustrating. And I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that we always, you know, have transparency at the forefront, and our integrity matters. I should say my integrity matters to me on what we do here. So I'm going to hold the board bill because I need clarity from the city council's office as far as these contracts. I take my position very seriously, and I've served on nonprofit boards before, and when decisions are made by the executive director, we get indemnified by, well, we're not really indemnified, but there's insurance to cover us if we are party to a lawsuit because of some action that was taken that may have not been appropriate. So I will be rescheduling the next hearing. It should go very fast. I just want to make sure that before we take this vote on the budget, that the treasurer gets the information that she's looking for as far as, you know, from the street department, because we have to work together. We have to work together. The treasurer needs the street department to do its business, you know, and we have to pass a budget so that we get people paychecks. So I'm committed to that, and I will reschedule a meeting at a different time. If I can do it this week, I'll do it this week. Otherwise, we'll meet again next week. And I'm going to go around with the committee one more time. We'll just do announcements, and then we're going to close out. So Alderman Kotar.
Yeah, Chairman, entirely unrelated to this, but, you know, just for anyone who is watching at home, the city special events office now has applications available. If we've got restaurateurs interested in maybe expanding into parts of the public right of way to expand their outdoor seating, we've got a pretty good process in place for that. I know a number of folks worked on that effort, and they turned that form around quickly. And I think we had some success with it this weekend. So I'm hoping more restaurants will participate in the weeks to come.
All right, thank you. Alderman Martin, anything good for the city?
I got nothing. It's a great place though. Wonderful.
Alderman Pam Boyd.
Nothing.
Alderman Bosley.
I have nothing either.
Okay, Alderman Middlebrook.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, well, we will consider the Streets, Traffic, and Refuge Committee adjourned. Thank you, everybody.